Hey guys, a video for the Buying a House in Japan playlist. This room here is sort of an office and storeroom and art gallery, all sorts of things. We need to turn it into a bedroom. So the first thing we need to do is to relocate the mini office. So at the other end of the house there's this tatami room, some of you might remember from old videos. And in the corner was a closet, sort of closet, cupboard, that had two doors on it and was full of stuff. So we've removed the two doors, removed most of the stuff, and then the plan is to make this into a little mini office and move all the stuff from that other room up to here. So it sort of was painted a little bit when we did the renovations about 8 years ago. It got a bit of paint in there, but the plan was to keep it as a cupboard, so it wasn't a very thorough job. Whereas with this plan it's going to be exposed permanently, well pretty much permanently, which means we want to make it look a bit better. So we got the unskilled labourer on the job with a tube of caulking, because there were still gaps around the place. When you paint walls white, any gaps show up, don't they? So the plan is to caulk all the gaps. And now the whole thing's exposed. We have to do under that table too, so caulk down there as well. Just the wrong height. If that was about a foot higher, that would have been much more comfortable under there. And as you will see, lots of time was spent underneath that table. Just the wrong height for a big fat man. So the caulking's dried, so it's time to mask it up, cover it all up so we can paint. It's supposed to be masking tape, that. It's more like packaging tape, but you know that stuff, you're better off tearing it than cutting it. That's what that was about then. Because it's really hard stuff to cut with scissors, but it's really easy to tear if you get a good grip on it and tear it quickly. You can make a nice, neat tear, much easier than you can cut it. That plastic's 0.1 of a millimeter, right? So super, super thin, 0.1 of a millimeter. So it's just to keep the paint off the table, so it doesn't have to be strong. So you'll notice the unskilled labourer wearing a variety of wardrobe, lots of different clothes. The reason is that these jobs get done usually in the morning before work, so, and on weekends, on days off, that sort of thing. So unfortunately work gets in the way of getting things done, doesn't it? Most people would find that. Work does get in the way of getting things done. So we can't put that plastic on the floor, obviously, because it'll just get torn up by the guy crawling all over it, so it's got to be careful down there. So there's a shelf up there, took that down and into it with the paintbrush. So yeah, these jobs are usually done in little hits of about 4 hours or 5 hours. Sometimes at night after work, sometimes in the morning. So sort of 4 or 5 hours at a time. So that's why you notice the clothes change. It's sort of like a big hit will be done. And if you do it right too, I mean obviously this, we want to do 2 coats of paint here. So get 1 coat of paint done and then leave it alone. Those of you who have done a bit of painting would know if you let the first coat dry before you do the second one, it does end up with a better result. If you do your second coat while your first one's still a bit tacky, it tends to not look as good. So when we do painting outside, we're usually saying that we're doing it to preserve the place, but obviously painting inside is purely aesthetic, isn't it? It's really the only reason we do it. You don't need to do it to protect anything inside. It's just purely aesthetic, isn't it? Just to make it look better. But in this case, the tatami room's sort of a bit of a special room, so I want to do a good job. And if you're going to do something, I mean the actual materials themselves, that paint was about $30 or $40. So it's mostly labour, so if you just spend a bit more time doing it. The caulking's a big point, of course, isn't it? Fill the gaps first before you paint. That's a horrible place underneath that table. Just can't get comfy. Just can't get comfy down there. So as that shelf was out, it made sense just to take it to the workshop and do it in there, give it a couple of coats, let it dry in there and then put it back. Oh, this is an experiment. That first room is covered in that fake wood paneling, and there's rumours that you can't paint that stuff, but if we can't paint it, that means we've got to resheet all the walls, and that's a huge job. So we decided we're going to experiment, so we painted a piece of it to see how it'd take, and it took like okay. So when that job comes around, we're leaning towards using the spray gun and spray painting the wall. So if any of you guys have had any experience of painting that fake wood paneling, it's shiny, it's smooth. That's probably the problem that people have with it. If you did it with a brush, you'd end up with lines. So if any of you guys have got any experience of that, we'd be interested to hear what you did, how it went for you. Oh yeah, watch this. Really unskilled, like super unskilled. Hitting your own finger with a rubber mallet is pretty unskilled, isn't it? Any way you look at it. So while the paint's drying, off to the storeroom, there's a few things that we're going to need. So one of them was ducting, electrical ducting, and sort of a bit of a mental stock take of what's in this room. And wait a minute, I think we've got some electrical ducting. So I went and had a look, and sure enough, there's some electrical ducting. So yes, we'll be needing that. So that room is gold. We save a few dollars now and again by going to that room. And everything in that room, well, most of the stuff in that room was there when we bought the old house 8 years ago. So it wasn't actually in that room, it was spread all over the place. But the logic was to put all the materials in one room, so when we need something, we can go in there to look for it. It tends to work. And then when we get offcuts and things left over from other jobs, we leave it in there too. Some people would call it stingy, some people would call it careful with money. Other people would call it being poor. So yeah, put the shelf in. It's already had 2 coats, and now giving the rest of the wall its second coat. Oh, it's terrible under that floor. And trying to do a neat job, trying not to spill the paint anywhere. Alright. That looks a bit better, doesn't it? Bit of an improvement. That tape, it's supposed to be masking tape, which is supposed to come off easily. It really didn't. It was really serious tape. It was almost like just normal packaging tape, but just green. But it's sold in the paint section of the home centre with the plastic and the paint, and it says that it's masking tape in Japanese. But yeah, pretty sticky for masking tape. Oh yeah, so okay, we've got a light fitting, bought a light fitting. Flimsy little things they are. Really frustrating when you do jobs in Japan. Try and buy good materials. They're really flimsy. I think in most countries, if you bought a light fitting, it should have switches mounted in it. And usually they're fairly substantial, aren't they? But they're just so flimsy. Everything here in the, you know, and that's the best you can get for a light fitting bracket. That's the standard. Just really thin and flimsy. It's frustrating. And when they click together, they don't really snap together like other ones do. They just sort of loosely clip together and gives you the feeling they're going to pop off any second. It is frustrating. When you do projects in Japan, you want good materials. It can be frustrating. Everything's cheap, which is good, but just too flimsy often, just too flimsy. So what we're doing here, we want to be able to put the cables neatly through the table when the computers go in. So making a hole and then putting the light fitting over the top of it, and then just putting some black tape in just to tidy it up a bit. So just rather than just have a hole, just to sort of tidy it up a bit, and then we can just feed the cables through there then. There you go. Right, so the next thing we want to be able to do is hide it all away, because the tatami room gets used when we have visitors and things, and we don't necessarily want all the office stuff sitting in the corner when we're entertaining people. And also we don't want the kids tempted, you know, when there's kids around, we don't want them tempted to come and fiddle with stuff. So the idea is to sort of hide it away a bit. So I had a bit of a plan in mind. Wanted a bracket a bit higher than the one that was there, or a frame a bit higher than the one that was there. So put that piece of wood across the top. Bit flimsy, but it'll do the job. And then some brackets. And then a blind. So obviously it's a window blind, it's supposed to go on a window. So it's a little bit flimsy. That wall's mud, of course. Wooden frame with mud. You can't drill into mud. So you've got to use the edges where the wood is. So that looks like this. Right? Just to sort of hide it away. It sort of works, doesn't it? And then the reason it mounted up higher on that wall is so that when it's rolled up like that, you can't see it. If it had just gone on the frame, you'd still be able to see it when it was rolled up. But because it's a little bit higher, you can't see it. So we've been experimenting a little bit with LED lights. We had a big light in one of the bedrooms, actually the bedroom that the job's going to be done in, and needed a new light, and spotted this really good one at the home centre that was only about $50 for a really big one, and it's LED, and so's this. And this was about $20, about 2,000 yen. And it makes a pretty good light, look at that. So we like them because they make a pretty good light, and also they don't get hot. The bulb doesn't get hot, which we like, and they're supposed to be economical as well, so we quite like them. We've started, when bulbs blow around the place, we've started replacing them with LEDs. You do get a bit of a pulsing thing from it, we've noticed. You get a strobe effect when you run water in the bathroom. We've got LEDs in the bathroom now too. When you run the water, you get a strobing effect from it. So it means it must be strobing. You just can't sort of see it with the naked eye unless something else is moving. So conduiting, see the duct in the corner there, the ducting, and then duct on top of the shelf as well, so when things get put on that shelf they don't damage the cable that goes to the light. Just ducting's good, you know, hides the wire away. It's not real popular in Japan, you don't get a lot of it. But we like it because it hides the cables away, so you're not looking at them all the time. So the next mission, we need to get a cable from the old room where the computer is at the other end of the house up to this end of the house. So it's from one end of the house to the other basically. So this was an experiment to get under the floor and see how far we could go. So we suspected we weren't going to go much further than the end of this room. So we fed a string down, dead spider. Dead spider, there was also half a dead mouse as well. But we fed a string down from the other cupboard in this room, which is up where we're going. So the idea was to crawl up there and see if we could go further than the end wall and grab the string and bring it back just in case we couldn't go further. And as it turns out, the way it works is the mud walls, the external walls of these old houses are mud, and the internal walls are as well, and they're very heavy. So they must build them on top of these concrete walls. So they have a concrete wall going up to floor level, and then they build the mud wall on top of that. They have to do that, of course. If they built it straight onto a wooden floor, it'd be too heavy. So the problem with that is we can't crawl to the other end of the house. We could only get to the end of this room. There's some vent holes, and we're hoping we could use them to feed a cable through and grab it from the other side, but they didn't line up. So see the holes there, you can see through. But it only gets about halfway through the house, and then from the other end we could only go 1 or 2 rooms as well. So we just couldn't make it that way, unfortunately. So very clean down there. There's grills on all the air venting. There's venting all the way around to let air through, which works really well in summer and in winter. And there's grills on them. So we saw half a dead mouse that looked like it had been there a very long time, and 1 dead spider, and that was it. There was nothing else down there. Fortunately, because it's not real high down there, you can't really move much. Very claustrophobic. Have a look at the wood. See the rough cut wood? Very common in Japanese construction. They use beams like that aren't fully square. They're rough cut, so they still look like a log. Pretty cool. Some of you might remember a video a long time ago in one of the other buildings up in the ceiling. Full on logs with big curves in them and everything. But yeah, just a really tight space down there. Really, really tricky. And you can see how tight it is to get in and out. Some of you on Facebook saw a photo that looked like the old guy was stuck in there. So we can't go all the way through underneath. So the plan is now, okay, we need to go up in the ceiling and then go up along through the ceiling till we get to the closet, or the other closet that's in that tatami room, and then down through the closet, then under the floor, and then back up where that new desk is. So this is this ugly feature on the ceiling of this room, and we assumed that ugly fake sill thing there had been put onto the ceiling solid, and as you'll see, it turns out it wasn't. We assumed to drill in that corner you'd have to go through that fake thing and then through the ceiling and then maybe through some other wood to get up into the ceiling. So we're expecting a big hassle here. Drilled 1 hole about 2 centimeters long and we're in the ceiling, which is good news as far as getting the cable up there, but bad news as far as the structure of the thing, because we were hoping to pull that ugly cornice thing down because we don't like it, but we can't, because if we pull it down there's nothing above it. There's no ceiling above it. The ceiling stops. So it was interesting to get up in the roof and see what this is like. We assumed it was way more solid than it is, and it's just not solid at all. So it's really lucky we got to check that out, because we were going to pull that corner thing down, and if we had, there would have been nothing above it, just straight into the roof. So that was a big surprise. It was a good news, bad news. It was good news because getting that cable up would be much easier, but a bit disappointing that the structure of it was the way it was built was so flimsy that it's going to limit what we can do in the renovation of this room. But anyway, so what we're feeding up is computer internet cable, telephone cable, and also a cable TV coax, because in that tatami room there's a television and video recorder and DVD player, but there isn't a television connection. So the plan is to drag a TV cable up there at the same time. We won't use it straight away, but sometime in the future we might. So that's computer cable, telephone cable, TV coax, and then 2 strings. And the idea is that the going in the roof is a real horrible job, as you'll see, so we don't want to do that again. So the plan is 2 strings. If we need to pull another cable in the future, we can. And also we ran a string to the back of the house because there's another building, and if we want to take a cable over there at any time in the future, we've got a string line there we can use to do it. So here we go up in the roof. So you can see the walls there, that's mud and bamboo frames with mud on it. Now you can't step on that, of course, because it's going to break. And then where the ceilings are, you can see there's very thin strips across there supporting the ceilings as well. You can't step on that either. So only those big serious beams there are going to take the weight. So it made it pretty tricky. Oh, look at this freaky thing. It looks like some sort of tree with rope tied around it, tied to the beam. Now that rope is usually used in connection to religious stuff or Shinto stuff, so it seems to be some sort of religious thing, probably to bring good luck or ward off evil spirits or something like that. Probably put up there when the house was built. Never seen anything like it before, but it's the only explanation for it. Something like that wrapped up in that sort of rope is usually a religious thing. So yeah, lots of care was required to be really careful up there and not fall through the ceiling, and they managed to pull the cables back and get them down through the floor. So we've now got our string going from the bottom of that closet across underneath here under the tatami and over to the corner there. And because the route got changed, we thought 20 metres was going to be enough. We'd measured it out. We thought 20 metres was going to be enough. Turns out with the new route, it only just made it up through the hole in the floor, which left us short. See the cable sticking out in the corner there? So we needed to get a couple of connectors to connect those cables to the short ones that we were already using. And then pulled electrical. We wanted to get electricity, so there's a power point over in the corner there that doesn't get used, so we pulled a cable from that. Pulled that up there. That power point never gets used, so I pulled a cable up there so we can tap into that power. There it is. Under the floor, pops up in the corner with the other ones. There they are. So your ducting time, it seems the ducting's made by the same people who make the light fittings, the light switch fittings. It's really flimsy. Some of you that have worked with electrical ducting before, if you get good stuff, you can cut it really easily. Usually it's fairly flexible and you can cut it without too much trouble. And the covers, when you put the covers on, usually clip on fairly substantially, and you can pull them off if you need to, but usually they stay on pretty well. But this stuff's just, it's cheap and flimsy, and when you cut it, it splits. You're really careful not to split it when you cut it. And when the covers go on, they sort of clip on sort of fairly weakly. Feels like they're going to come off. So it's a bit frustrating. If they had better stuff that was a little bit more expensive, we'd probably buy it because, you know, we like to use good materials, so it's a little bit frustrating. Anyway, it's okay, it'll stay on. So we didn't see anything living underneath the floor, but just in case there is, just seal up that hole where the cables came through with some silicone, brown silicone, just to stop anything crawling up the hole. And then once that door's closed, then we'll forget that it all exists. And then over underneath the table there, that wood underneath there was just untreated. It was because it was a closet, it was just bare wood. So just giving it a coat of floor wax, because that other wood there that the old guy's on, we wax that fairly regularly. So just wax that bare wood underneath the table and it came up really well. So it just stops it drying out and splitting and just gives it a nice surface, you know, makes it a really nice surface, that wood that's waxed. Very pleasant. So conduiting, putting more duct. Don't want to really see the wires under the table, so some more ducting and some joiners to join those short cables onto the ones that came up from under the floor. And then clips, electrical clips nailed to the support beam under the table, and then cable ties, tying the cables onto the clips, just to get everything up out of the way. And then some of those curly things, you know, the plastic curly things, when you coil your wire up and then put the little curly things around it to keep it all nice and neat and together. So we obviously need to be on the internet. It's what we do. So we need to be on the internet all the time. So we had the computer fired up in the other room in the morning, and then we shut it down, brought it up here, put it on the table, got all this cabling done, connected it all up. So we're only without the internet for about an hour or so, which is sort of important to us because we've got you guys, and YouTube, and we've got the English friendly directory, and we've got all sorts of stuff going on the internet, so we really need to be constantly connected. So we had about an hour. There's a bit of anxiety at the end, connecting it up and powering it up. You guys that have pulled cables know you never know if your cable's been damaged by a pointy nail or something that you haven't noticed. A bit of anxiety at the end there when you first turn everything on, see if it all works. So happy days, it worked. Powered up. So now we've still got a room full of stuff down the other end of the house that needs to be emptied, but we have the internet connected up this end, so now we're just got to start hauling everything out of that other room, bring it all up here. So a quick before and after. That's what it looked like before. Very pink and cute and messy. That's what it looks like now. So that's what we're aiming for. Actually, it's going to look a lot more cluttered than that very soon when all the stuff gets brought up from the other room. That's the neatest it's ever going to look. So once it's full of clutter and there's lots of stuff there, we can tidy it up simply by doing this. That fixes it. Hide it away. Good strategy. Okay, so here's the next project. We need to empty this room out, and then obviously we have to modify the plan. No plan that we've ever done at this old house has ever gone exactly the way it was originally supposed to. We have to adapt. So we've adapted the plan. That's the next project. Stand by for that one. More videos coming soon.